All right, usually this is a two-part lecture. So I think we'll just go all the way through it. Okay, so you've got what are we talking about? We're talking about women's history objects from the Smithsonian. They had 2,000 submitted, and they picked 300 for this book that I read. Okay, so let's go with 1600 to 1864, tradition and resistance in a young nation. This is a Native American effigy bottle, probably from Tennessee, Missouri, and Arkansas. So we're going way back. So we're going to, 1400s and 1500s here. Okay, and then this is a very famous print of none other than Pocahontas by Simon Van Passy. And I believe she made it to England. I think that's where she died. But yeah, so that's a very, very famous image of her. And then this is an embroidered banner. Embroidery was kind of a big deal back in the 1700s and early 1800s for women as their sort of artistic medium. Okay. And then you've got Julia Child's kitchen history. Kitchen donated in 2001. And so if you don't know her already, Julia Child was a fascinating person who basically taught America how to cook French cuisine. That was kind of her big deal. And she was really a trailblazer with regards to doing a cooking show on the TV, which, of course, now is very, very big in TV land. But she was really one of the first. And then this is Martha Rossler's Semiotics of the Kitchen. It's a feminist piece. She gets very angry at points in the video, and it's really kind of a alternative to the happy kitchen of Julia Child. Okay, this is Leah Chase. She is a very famous woman from New Orleans, and she had this restaurant called the Dookie Chase Restaurant. That is her chef jacket, and then one of her Magdalite pots. And then there is actually a painting of her by Gustave Blanche. So that's kind of fun. All right, so now we're looking at Our Lady of Guadalupe, who, of course, is the most famous saint of Mexico. So when you go to Mexico, you see her all over the place. And then this is another one of those embroideries. This is a sampler by Betsy Buckland. And then this is going to be a poems by Phyllis Wheatley. She was born a slave and became one of the most famous poets of her time, 1773. Lots of people really love her poetry. And I think, do I have? Oh no! So this is Elizabeth Catlett, who's of course a very, very famous 20th century African American sculptor, and this is her sculpture of Phyllis Wheatley. Okay, and then here's I think we just skipped one. Sorry about that. Spinning frame. So let's go to the abolitionist. This is Sojourner of Truth. I sell the truth to support the substance. So her photographs were sold all over America to raise money for the end of slavery. And she really knew her role as a woman who could hopefully move America towards, not a civil war, I guess, but probably move America towards anti-slavery. Okay. And then this is Harriet Tubman's photograph, which had the same sort of interest as far as selling the photograph to make money for abolitionism. And then, yeah, so led raid up the Combahee River in South Carolina and freed 700 enslaved African Americans. That's pretty impressive. And then, yeah, so the actual shawl, I guess you would call it maybe, is on the right that she wore. Okay, so there were some women who were involved in the Civil War. This is a female Vanderese uniform from a SWA unit. And I think, yeah, so they would have been aides de camp as far as like domestic chores and that sort of thing. But there were some women actually who passed a little, well, that's not really passing, that passed as male combatants. But I don't think that's what we're seeing here. This is Mary Walker. I think she was a Confederate. Excuse me. All right, let's keep going. All right. And then I've always loved this one. So a scientist, an actor, and a dressmaker. Mary Mitchell and her students. Mary Mitchell was a professor at Vassar. So yeah, here are her astronomy students, which is pretty cool. Yeah, so Maria Mitchell and her students. And then this is a cloak worn by Charlotte Cushman in the role as Cardinal Wolsey in Henry VIII. Here is Elizabeth Keckley, an absolutely fascinating figure. She was African American. She paid for her freedom. She was actually in the household of Jefferson Davis, the president of the Confederacy, and then eventually ended up being the dressmaker for Mary Todd Lincoln. There's no less than 2 or 3 plays that have been written about her lately. And yeah, just a really interesting woman. All right, now we're going to go to 1865 to 1920, the road to reform. And this is Mary Harding Baker's, not to be confused with our dance instructor, solar system quilt, which I'm loving. I love quilts, and I like anything to do with the solar system. So that's kind of fun. And then here is Suzette La Flèche from the Omaha tribe. And I believe, I can't really remember what her deal was. Was she involved in science? Yeah, she must have been involved in science, but I don't know in which capacity. Okay, here's a Lucy Stone's women's suffrage wagon from 1870. The suffragettes were really a powerful force in the late 19th century and early 20th century, although it did take them quite a bit of time to finally get the vote. But yeah, so this would have been in a parade. And then this is Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony, 2 of the more prominent suffragettes. And that's the table where they drafted the Declaration of Sentiments in 1848 for the convention in Seneca Falls. So if you know anything about women's history, you know that Seneca Falls is really, really important. Okay, so this is a Christian temperance. This is a women's suffrage banner, which that's interesting. I love the colors. Yeah, so that's what that is. And then the next one is the Christian Temperance Union hatchet. Now, there were a number of German immigrants in Minnesota who didn't want women to get the right to vote because they believed that women would bring about prohibition of alcohol, which I guess was true. But that's kind of an interesting connection. I never understood that, why certain groups in America were not for suffrage. But I do understand it with regards to that group, at least. And then this is a Union Local 17 banner, International Ladies Garment Workers, 1905. I'm a big believer in unions, and I'm glad there's some history here from the book on women's history. Okay, so this is Elizabeth Hickox's baskets: spruce root, beargrass, dyed porcupine quills, and maidenhair fern. And yeah, so her mother survived a very traumatic event in California and taught her how to do these incredible baskets. And there's a real new interest in Native American baskets for sure. Okay, this is Ida B. Wells. Some of you might have come across her before. She was very much a journalist who was against racial violence, and so she wrote Southern Horrors in 1892. One of the most famous journalists of her time, for sure. Okay, Black Midwives and Doctors. This is possibly Dr. Sarah Lagoon Fraser, one of 115 in the nation in the 1890s. African-American midwives still delivered as many as half of the black babies born in southern states in the 1950s. And this particular photograph was acquired by the Smithsonian in 2014. Okay, this is Queen Lily. I'm going to mispronounce. I'm just going to say Queen Lily. And did you know that she was actually a very popular author in her time? Hawaii had universal suffrage in 1840 and 90% and a 95% literacy rate. So they were way ahead of the curve with the rest of the United States. Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't know that about her, that she was a really respected author. Okay, Madam C.J. Walker was the first millionaire African American, which is interesting because she made a lot of her money off of beauty products that sometimes made African American women, have straightened hair and so on and so forth. And yeah, I think I have a picture of the sale force, don't I? No. Oh, shoot. Okay. Now, these are moss sanitary napkins. Yes, you heard it. It's made out of moss. Okay. And then I love aviation history. This is Harriet Quimby, first American woman to gain a pilot license. And then this is Bessie Coleman, first African-American woman to gain a pilot license. And they all did this in France, actually. Okay, now let's go to the rise of the modern woman. This is, of course, Marian Anderson, who on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial gave a concert. I'm sure you've heard about that before. She was not allowed into the Daughters of American Revolution Hall because of racism. And then this is the dress that she wore at her famous concert and the very warm-looking fur coat. Okay, so let's keep going. We're doing pretty well. This is Madame Avanti. She wears an opera costume from Lakme, 1925. And then this is her custom-built Fisher piano. Came into the Anacostia Community Museum in 2002. So a music star, which is pretty cool. Let's go into diverse Hollywood. This is Dolores Del Rio. Strauss and Penton's picture of her in the upper left. There's a film still down at the bottom. And then the Lucky Strike cigarette advertisement on the top right. And then I call you my own sheet music. Okay, yeah, so sheet music in the bottom left. This is fun. So Anna May Wong, of course, was a major film actress. And this is Carl Van Vechten's Anna May Wong on the left, which is a really famous photograph. And then another in one of her roles on the right. And there's been no less than a couple books recently published on her. Okay, so what about scientists through time? So this is Agnes Chase. She was a botanist, and she was collecting plants in Brazil. And then here's one of my favorites, Amelia Earhart, given to the Smithsonian in 1940, the picture that was owned by her mother. And then this is one of her famous Lockheed Vega 5s, which is probably in the Air and Space Museum. And then here's her flight suit on the left, and then goggles on the right. Okay, now into the workforce. Let's go. So this is a telephone switchboard. I don't think they were using them in my time. I think they were kind of taken out. But so yeah, a lot of women did switchboard work. And then this is Concha Sanchez's electric corn grinder. She made corn tortillas on the streets of, I think, LA, which is kind of it's so interesting to see these types of objects come into the Smithsonian collection for sure. And then this is Eleanor Roosevelt with her glasses on the left and an advertisement on the right for an airline, which is pretty interesting. And then this is, there's a couple of women in World War II. Della Hayden Rainey on the left of the Army Nursing Corps, and she retired as a major in 1972. And then these, of course, are the WASPs, Women Air Force Service Pilots, who ferried airplanes across America from California to the East Coast, and I think even to England. And they're finally getting recognized by President Obama with congressional gold medals in 2009. All right, and then this is the tunic, dress, beret, and logo of the 319th WASP group, which is pretty cool. All right, and then on the home front, now this is interesting. A lot of you are familiar with this particular poster. The poster was only up for 13 days at a Westinghouse Electric and Manufacturing Company in February of 1943. And of course, now it's been taken up by feminists and women, historians of American women history. But it's kind of interesting to know that it just was up for 13 days. Okay, and then this is Shirley Armstrong of the Woman's Land Army of America on Life magazine on September 27th, 1943. Okay, let's just keep going. Let's not pause. Let's go to the second sort of installment, and away we go. So this is Kiko Sakamachi, and this is her card when she was relocated from California to one of the camps during World War II, and then that's a beautiful selection of her sculptures on the right, and then painting that she did in the bottom left while she was in one of the internment camps. All right, let's go into politics. The Secretary of Labor, Frances Perkins, at her desk, she was the first woman cabinet member of in American history, I think. Yeah, that's right. Okay. And then I love this one. So actually, the first Republican woman who ran for president was Margaret Chase Smith. And that's one of her buttons. And then Nancy Pelosi's gavel is on the far right. And then in the middle, you have the first woman to run as vice president in 1984. And that's Geraldine Ferraro, sorry. And then, let's see. Okay, then Shirley Chisholm was the first African-American woman to run for president. And that's her poster on the left. And then Kamala Harris and Joe Biden in the middle. I've always loved that particular lawn sign. And then Hillary in 2016, I'm with her. Okay, so here we go with birth control pill dispenser that came out in 1960, which radically changed American culture. And then this is Gladys Tanaquitgan on the left, and she was a Mohegan medicine woman. Okay, sorry, I screwed that up. This is Nanticoke Chief Russell Clark and Gladys Tanaquitgan on the left, and then a mounted plant specimen on the right. Okay, so I think I accidentally skipped Gladys. Okay. All right, here's a selection of African-American hats from churches. And this is from a millinery shop of Philadelphia. Hats from 1941 to 1994, very straightforward with their with the title of their place, hats. All right, and then here you've got Tupperware, invented by Earl Tupper, but Brownie Wise made Tupperware a big thing in American homes. And of course, women would sell Tupperware home parties, and that's an advertisement on the right. Okay, Rachel Carson, of course, changed the course of American culture. She was actually a marine biologist, which is pretty interesting. And she wrote this book, Silent Spring, about the poisoning of America with chemicals. And so one of the most famous books ever, nonfiction books ever written by a woman, American woman. And then I don't know too much about this. This is Vera Rubins. She's an astronomer. And here she is on the left at the Lowell Observatory. And then there's a spectrograph on the right. Okay, now let's go to some activists. This is, of course, Nina Simone. And the very famous song, Mississippi Goddamn. And then you've got Barbara Giddings, who was a LGBTQ rights activist with her dress on the right. And then here you've got Dolores Huerta. It's a print by Barbara Carrasco. And of course, she was involved in the United Farm Workers' Strike of 1965. Okay, so now we're going to look at a space and airline travel thing. And this is the red Starfleet uniform worn by Nichelle Nichols as Lieutenant Uhura on the first Star Trek from 66 to 68, I think. And what's interesting about her is she really promoted the idea of diversifying the astronaut pool, and it led to some people actually being picked for astronaut training which is a huge deal. And it's pretty cool that it was a woman who was a TV star that promoted it. Okay, now where are we? All right, so this is an airline stewardess's uniform on the left, and for TWA, and then on the right, kind of a little bit more, I guess, sort of colorful and fun, Braniff International Airways from 1965. All right, let's keep going. And then this is the first official maternity uniform for a pregnant pilot. That's from the early 1990s. Okay, now let's look at some sport legends. Wallace Sewell's photograph of Althea Gibbons, who was a very famous African-American tennis player. And then you've got one of my favorites, Wilma Rudolph on the right. Okay. And then this is a tennis dress made for Billie Jean King, who is a huge feminist role model from the sports world. And then a fencing mask from Ibtia Muhammad, who I think it was the Rio Games won a medal, and she's now a commentator, and she's really good at explaining fencing. Okay, you've probably heard of this group before for space flight. So this is Katherine Johnson, and on the left, and she was among a number of African-American mathematicians known from the movie Hidden Figures, who basically were instrumental in particularly the Mercury astronauts. John Glenn wanted her to do the mathematical calculations for his re-entering into Earth. And yeah, it's a great book. It's a great movie. I highly recommend it. Okay, and here's Barack Obama giving Johnson the Presidential Medal of Honor. Okay, and then this is... Oh, and down below was the Hidden Figures cast with Johnson. Okay, so Margaret Hamilton was the Apollo flight guidance computer software expert, and she's standing next to the listings of software she and her MIT team produced for the Apollo project in 1969. You wonder what that would look like today. Probably a lot smaller. All right, breakthroughs and backlashes. Astronauts. This is Sally Ride's uniform. I believe she was the first woman astronaut in 1983. And then here's Mae Jemison, first African-American woman in space, 1992. And then this is kind of fun. Entertainment. Here we go. Cecilia Cruz, dress made by Enrique Arteaga. And then down to the right is another outfit that was for Cecilia Cruz. This is kind of fun. This is Dakota Jackson's Oprah's Couch. Oprah, of course, created the talk show, basically. Well, she didn't create the talk show, but she took it to another level, let's just say that. And that's Oprah, of course, I think she's a billionaire, probably. Very influential individual in women's history of the 20th and 21st centuries. Okay, so this is Alice Paul's ERA bracelet by the National Women's Party. Each of these states had actually ratified the Equal Rights Amendment. And Alice Paul was really the radical of the suffrage movement in America in the 20th century. Okay, so here are here's the women of the Supreme Court. Sandra Day O'Connor, of course, was the first, and to the right is Sonia Sotomayor, Ellen Kagan, Sandra Day O'Connor, who of course is not alive anymore, and Ruth Bader Ginsburg, also not alive anymore. And there's Uh, is there two more women of the court? Yes, definitely. One very liberal, one not very liberal. Okay, now let's finish up. No, we've got some more. What was I thinking? Okay, so this is Angela Davis, a very interesting, radical African American woman of the 20th century. And then that's her button. Okay, we're still going here. Okay. And then here is Margaret Geller, an astrophysicist. The universe she found out that the universe had a distinct structure of galaxy clusters and empty spaces. I don't exactly understand that, but that's okay. And then this is Barbara McClintock's geneticist microscope. Some genes can move to a new location. New location on a chromosome is what she discovered. All right, now here's a little bit of military history. This is Major Rhonda Corman. She was captured during the first Gulf War in '92 and was a flight surgeon. Hello, that's pretty cool. And then this is Major Fifi Malchowski's helmet and flight equipment was a Thunderbird pilot for 2006, 2007. The Thunderbirds are a demonstration group from the Air Force and do amazing things in the sky, and she was the first woman to do it. This is Micheline Bigman's color guard dress for the first all-native color guard. And I really like this. It's a jingle dress, no less. All right, the first woman to get into West Point was Jane Perkins McCown, and this is the first. She was in the first class of women graduates in 1980, and I actually remember that. I remember when women were first. Came into the service academies. Okay, this is Admiral Michelle Howard's naval dress cap. She was the first African-American woman to command a U.S. Navy ship. Oh, that's pretty cool. The USS Rushmore. Okay, so here's some tireless transgender advocates. This is Louise Carl's photograph of Sylvia Rivera, Julia Murray, her partner, Christina Hayworth. They co-founded the Street Transvestite Action Revolutionaries. All right, so this is Miss Magazine, the most famous feminist magazine ever published. And it's from September 1971. And of course, Gloria Steinman and Dorothea Pittman Hughes were the publishers. They're on the left in 1971 and 42 years later in 2013. All right, so this is Kadir Nelson's his painting of Henrietta Lacks. Her cancer cells were copied by, I think, John Hopkins in Baltimore, and those cells were some of the most important cells in the history of cancer research. There's a book about it. There's a movie. It's a very, very interesting story. Okay, this is Quinceanera, I think I'm mispronouncing that, gown from Natalie Flores. And, of course, that's a big celebration in the communities throughout the United States and beyond, Latin American countries. And, yeah, I'm glad that there's one of those dresses in the collection. Okay, protest movements of the 21st century. Black Lives Matter every day on the left, and This Ain't Your Mama's Civil Rights Movement t-shirt on the right. And then this is, of course, the Pussy Power hat worn during the Women's March in Washington in January 2017. And then last but not least, African-American sororities, Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority. You have Kamala Harris, who was a member. And then you have the Diamond Jubilee pin on the upper right. And then the customized Sigma Gamma Rho Converse sneakers of MC Light. Okay, we did it. Women's history through lots of objects.